Hi there. A while back, I reviewed Drug War by Peter Walsh. Really good book, and I recommended it to a friend of mine. And next time I saw him, he was going on about it, but he'd actually bought the wrong book. He bought a book called Drug Wars by Neil Woods. And what he told me about it um, absolutely made me want to read it. So I got hold of it myself, and I was absolutely entranced right from the beginning, because the book starts, and I'll read a quote from the preface. The observation van is parked on a rough dead-end street in Leeds, running surveillance on a high-level Bradford drug dealer. Suddenly, the van is surrounded by men in balaclavas. It is tied shut, doused in petrol, and set on fire. The two cops inside barely get out alive. It was no accident that the gangsters knew that there was an obs van outside their safe house that night. They had moles inside the police feeding them information. That incident was never reported in the press, but I remember the operation well. The thought of those two officers trapped inside the burning vehicle stuck with me. It forced me to once again ask myself a gnawing question. How had it come to this? How had it got to the point where police come under attack because their own system has been corrupted? This wasn't the first time on the force I'd experienced high-level corruption. When I was working undercover in Nottingham, my own unit had been infiltrated by the sociopathic drug kingpin Colin Gunn. And he goes on to talk about that. What this kingpin had done was pay a young guy to join the police, and he paid him a salary on top of what he got from the police, and this guy infiltrated. And this was a storyline in the Line of Duty series, which I thought was just a work of fiction, but it turned out that actually had happened at least once. Neil Woods was an undercover police officer, and he's writing from first-hand experience. So the book goes on to talk about something that, when I reviewed the previous book, I mentioned the system in the United Kingdom where you could become a registered heroin addict, and there wasn't really a heroin problem as a result of this. And Neil Woods calls this the British system, and it was the way we controlled our drugs. In contrast to the American system, which was really a type of prohibition approach that had not worked with alcohol. So the book, it's just so quotable. On every page there's things you want to tell people about. It's really a superb book, and it goes over the whole history right up to the present day. And one of the points he makes is that the biggest drug cartel in history wasn't Escobar and Medellin and all those guys, or the Mexican cartels now. It was the British East India Company with the opium trade. So that was quite an interesting nugget. He talks about collusion between politicians and the press to make headlines and have a story to give a political career a leg up. Some really stark examples of that. And the press don't come out of this book well at all. One example, during World War I, or around that time, a lot of what are hard drugs were very widely available just in normal shops. I mean, if you think of the Sherlock Holmes stories, when he smoked opium, that wasn't seen as an addiction. It was just like smoking a cigar or drinking a brandy. And you could buy cocaine in places like Harrods, and girls would buy a little set which included cocaine to send to their boyfriends, or to give to the boyfriends as they went to fight in World War One. And the press uncovered a scandal that the Canadian troops who'd come over, and apparently cocaine wasn't legal over there, and they were suddenly flooded with cocaine and became addicts and became militarily unusable. It turns out the truth was that one Canadian officer, a major, had been able to buy, he ran a sting operation to see what the problem was, and he'd been able to buy some cocaine from a prostitute, and that was it. There was no widespread problem at all. It was just made up. And then the press later on in the 60s, targeting the various pop stars, generally possession of marijuana, and the officer who led a lot of those raids gained a lot of notoriety. Pilcher, his name was, and was always in the press. The press were always conveniently outside the premises that were being raided. A lot of collusion. He was later himself jailed on corruption charges. The politicians used drugs for their own ends, and it was either an opportunity for advancement, or it was seen as an embarrassment and a problem that they couldn't solve or didn't really want to solve. Now, and one case is that the government had announced at the time, in the 60s, had announced that in doing away, when they did get rid of the registered heroin addicts, they would be given treatment in rehabilitation centres, these special centres set up. And one chap, a doctor, wanted to find out more about this, and he wrote to the Home Office and to the Ministry of Health, and he was given a list of hospitals that had these designated centres, and he went round them, and they just didn't exist. It was the total bluff. Really echoes of how the Chinese virus was treated here. Misinformation and dithering and so on by the government. One of the really disturbing things that comes out of the book is the levels of police corruption. And I mean, we've all known about police corruption. It's been well documented in certain police units. The flying squad at one time was right at the top. The commander of the flying squad was jailed for corruption, and the process was quite well known. You know, particularly in the CID and the Met. However, this book illustrates that no unit really was immune. And if you think about it, if you want to corrupt police officers, you're going to go for the ones in the more specialised units, because they're going to give you access to the kind of information you want. So even special branch, even SO10 at the time, which was responsible for witness protection, was corrupt. And it's not. This isn't rumours. This is documented cases, and particularly one whistleblower, a guy who was trying to fight corruption and expose it in the witness protection system, found himself being followed. He did checks on, because he was very surveillance aware, did checks on the vehicles, found out they were blocked numbers, i.e. police vehicles, and backtracked one of them and found a whole surveillance caravan parked up with motorcycles, scrambler bikes inside vans and everything, all ready to follow him. And he was stopped a couple of days later by a marked traffic unit. And while he's talking to them, two special branch guys are approaching him, and he says to the traffic officers, "Keep them away from me, they're going to fit me up." And the traffic officers, to their credit, said, "Stay back, we're dealing with this." He showed them his police ID, and they went, "We don't have anything to do with this," and let him go. And he reckoned that they would have planted drugs on him, or tried to discredit him in some way. So that's just one of the examples in the book. And there's quite a bit on Liverpool, and I've got to say, everything he talks about the Liverpool scene rang very true. The rave scene and so on, and he was spot on with that. He's got that right. Similarly, he talks about Manchester. I don't have much information about Manchester at all, but based on what he says about Liverpool, it's probably just as accurate. The book really changed my view. It didn't change my view about drugs and how bad they are and how unnecessary it is to take them, but it changed my view on why we failed to control them, and in the so-called war on drugs, why that's failed. The forces massed against law and order, and unfortunately a lot of them are from within law and order, corruption from within. Really, it was doomed from the start. Terrific book. I can't recommend it enough. As I said, I was hooked right from the first page or the preface right to the end. It gave you fascinating insights, lots of interviews with people. Some of them are not very nice people, criminals themselves. Some of them are criminals who are quite, you would say, fairly decent people. They just happen to be breaking the law. There's quite a bit about, there was a famous Operation Julie, which was against LSD, and really, when you read that, it was just such a waste of time, and it was just totally a meaningless operation, which got a lot of publicity at the time. So, Drug Wars by Neil Woods, terrific book.